I'm a reporter for a local news station in Florida. I was given the task of covering a story about temporary, untraceable license plates being sold at several little-known dealerships. During my assignment, I interviewed the manager of a dealership that seemed to not have any cars in the front or back lots. Since we did not get very much of a response worthy of a broadcast, we decided to investigate another one. My team eventually found the dealership in a rather cringy part of town. Several abandoned businesses surrounded the empty lots, and my cameraman pointed out a couple shady individuals hanging out near the road. It probably was not a smart idea to try to find an interview in a place like this, but we really wanted this story to impress our viewers. With my microphone ready and our cameras rolling, I knocked on the door of the dealership. My team and I were unsettled when a man with a scraggly facial hair wearing dirty clothes opened the door to greet us with an angry grunt. Immediately I knew this could lead to trouble, but my job as a reporter saw this potential trouble as a potential story. I asked the man the usual questions about the rising fake license plates being sold to and used by criminals. All the while, our cameras were rolling. To my shock, as my camera crew witnessed, the man at the door took 2 steps towards me, got in my face, and threatened to murder me and my crew, burn our cameras and the news truck, and toss our bodies in the ocean. He then stepped back and crossed his arms. I know I should have just had my crew turn tail and run, but once again my desire for a story overcame my sense of danger, and I informed the man he was being recorded and we would contact the police if he tried anything. He just stared with a blank expression, not reacting whatsoever. Then we heard something that made our hearts stop. The sound of our van starting up behind us. We looked back and saw 2 men in the front seats. Before we could do anything, they took off down the road with our news van. I was about to run after them and scream when something poked me in the back. I turned again and was horrified to see the man had a gun pointed right at my chest, inches away from my heart. I froze, dropped my microphone, and put my hands up. I tried to speak, but the gunman ordered my cameraman and tech support to drop all their equipment now, or he would shoot me dead. My 2 crewmen followed the command to drop their cameras, mics, and all other news gear they had. The man kept his gun pressed against my chest the whole time. He then ordered us all to hand over our cell phones and wallets. We all did as we were told, having no other way out. The gunman then told us to tell our local news station to back off from this whole license plate story and mind our own business. Then, 2 other men came out of the building and began grabbing the news equipment we dropped. When they stole every piece of gear we had, the man backed up and closed the door. My crew and I were left stunned and silent, in a state of disbelief of what just happened. Once the shock wore off, we did the only thing left we could do: walk back to our headquarters and call the police. A few hours later, we heard back from the cops. All our news equipment had been smashed and burned along with our cell phones. To my my surprise, though, my cameraman somehow managed to smuggle an SD card up his sleeve while we were held at gunpoint, so some of the footage was saved. Our van was also found, smashed beyond recognition in a wooded area. The 3 people in the dealership were arrested, but the guys who stole our van never got caught. From that day on, I always prioritized my safety and the safety of my crew over getting a good story. I was a FedEx delivery driver for about a year during the beginning of my college days. Near the end of that job, I experienced the scariest event of my life. It was a cold winter day in 2017. It was cloudy and slightly foggy, so I had my headlights on. My shift was from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Around 5 o'clock, when the sun started to set, I was driving down a neighborhood road to deliver packages to 2 houses close to each other. I was in a rush, so I quickly checked the addresses and dropped the packages off, not bothering to take note of the houses I was delivering at. I got back in my truck and was about to drive off when someone suddenly ran up to my window and called to me. I asked them what was wrong, and they asked me why I delivered to that house. They told me the house number, and I realized I had mistakenly left the package at the wrong house. I thanked them and got out of my truck. However, as I made my way towards the house, they told me that it had been abandoned for weeks ever since the owners died. The second I heard them say that, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. The package was gone, and the door of the house was cracked open. I froze for a bit, but reasoned someone must have been playing a prank on me. Though I tried to tell myself that, and my walk to the house was not hesitant, I couldn't deny I was feeling uneasy. I knocked on the door of the house, asking for the package back. The door opened wider as I knocked. I looked inside the house, surprised to see the horrible condition it was in. Everything was dirty and dusty, like nobody had been there in months. The lights were all off, and the curtains were shut. Inside it was eerily silent. Not seeing any other option, I stepped inside. I called out for anyone that could be inside. No answer. However, not even 2 seconds later, I heard footsteps coming from upstairs. I hurried upstairs, not considering that I was possibly entering someone's house without permission. Deep down I was scared, but I remained convinced I was being pranked. When I got upstairs, my confidence suddenly faded when I saw how dark it was. I could barely see anything. There were no lights in the hallway or rooms at all. Only cracks of fading daylight through closed curtains were a source of sight. Trying not to be deterred, I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. I went from room to room, shining the light to find the package. The unkept state of each room finally began to disturb me. I realized it was entirely possible nobody really had lived here for weeks. The silence besides my footsteps was admittedly terrifying in the dark, dusty house. I looked in another room, which appeared to be a library. Suddenly, I heard a creaking noise in front of me. I turned and saw the door at the end of the hall slowly begin to open. My heart began to race, but I assumed it had opened due to a draft from an open window. I walked over to it and looked inside the room. Immediately, something completely unexpected hit me like a stray bullet. A putrid odor of rot was emanating from the room. I cringed from reflex, but for some reason barely hesitated to look inside. I shined my flashlight and realized it was a bedroom. This room was definitely the filthiest. I felt my stomach give a sickening twist when I noticed black stains on the carpet in bed. I had no idea what those marks were, but I did not want to think of any possibilities. I realized I had enough. This was not what I was paid to do. Giving a heavy sigh that broke the silence more than anything else, I turned around to leave the house. My heart exploded wildly when I saw a dark, tall figure standing at the end of the barely lit hall. It looked like nothing but a shadow firmly blocking the stairway. My breath was locked in my lungs. I could barely breathe. The figure did not move and only stood there, blocking my only escape route. Suddenly, I heard a voice calling from downstairs, asking if I was okay. I gasped, and after a few blinks, the figure instantly vanished. I did not waste any time. Before I could come back, I ran for the stairs and the front door. 2 people from the neighborhood were waiting outside. I made it outside and began panting on the stone walkway, hunched over and sweating. The neighbors kept asking me what happened, but I wasn't listening. However, I managed to catch one of them saying that they were sorry and that they picked up the package when they realized it was at the wrong house. I stopped panting, then sighed, realizing that terrifying experience was all for nothing. I said nothing to the neighbors and did not look back at them. I simply got back in my truck and continued the rest of my shift without any problems. It's been years and I still haven't forgotten this incident. I can't say that I believe in the paranormal. Part of me still wants to believe what I went through was nothing but a well-thought-out prank. But then I think about that dark figure instantly vanishing right in front of me. I have yet to think of a logical explanation for that. Working the night shift at a 7-Eleven in the suburbs may not sound like an ideal job, but it was for me at the time. I didn't mind staying up late as I was done with college and needed to start my career life somewhere. One summer night, a thunderstorm was raging outside. Usually I enjoy thunderstorms, but not when I'm in an environment like a convenience store. While I was stocking the snack shelves, I thought to myself that I hoped we would not lose power. As if on cue, the lights began to flicker. I anticipated them going out entirely, but they just continued to flicker. Eventually they stopped, and I went back behind the counter. I saw another flash of lightning and glanced out the window. In the back of my mind, I was wondering about the possibility of a robbery. Stuff like that happens sometimes. I always try to prepare myself for such situations. I would not be prepared for what happened next, though. I heard something from outside and saw a small car pull up into the handicapped parking spot right in front of the store. I figured it was likely a customer and not somebody ready to cause trouble. Suddenly, the lights flickered again, and with a loud click, they shut off entirely. I expected the generator to kick in after a few seconds, but to my dismay, the entire store remained dark. There was no power, not even the emergency lights in the corners of the ceiling. I then realized the only thing lighting up the store were the headlights from the car in the parking lot. What happened next still terrifies me to this day. Out of the compact car came not one, not two, but 7 people. Only 2 of them were wearing masks and sunglasses. The other 5 had no disguises. What immediately shocked me was how loud and wild their behavior was. They were screaming so loud I could barely understand them. Before I could process what was happening, a large man ran towards me, crawled over the counter, and reached for me, all the while shouting incoherently. I backed away and tried to run for the back of the store, but I was quickly blocked by a young woman who was barely clothed and soaking wet. She had her arms spread out, intentionally blocking me. Among the wild, crazed shouts, I could hear the whole store being violently ransacked. I looked over to see what was happening, but the second I turned away from her, the woman in front of me wrapped her arms around my neck and almost dragged me down. She started whispering to me, but I couldn't understand her. From her slurring, I assumed she was either drunk or high. I quickly pushed her off and attempted to scream at these people to leave the store or I would call the police. However, I was stopped when the man who crawled over the counter grabbed my arm and pushed me to the ground. He immediately sat on my stomach, pinning me down. What he did next would haunt me for the rest of my life. He wrapped his hands around my throat and started choking me. All the while I could see his face distorted with an unnatural, insane smile. I was terrified this madman was trying to kill me. I tried doing what was supposed to be done and reached for his eyes. To my horror, though, no matter how much I clawed at his face, he seemed completely unaffected. I gathered all my strength, closed my eyes, and shoved my fingers directly into his eye. I don't know what happened after that, because I blacked out that very second. The next thing I remember, I was sitting on the sidewalk in front of the store. Police cars and an ambulance were parked in front with their lights on. I was completely confused. Time just seemed to snap forward without my awareness. I was then approached by a paramedic who asked if I was okay. I didn't answer, and the next thing I remember, I was being led into the ambulance and driven to the hospital. My memories of the rest of this ordeal are very blurry, but from what I was told, the 7 drugged-out maniacs who invaded my store fled when one of them screamed and the lights came back on. Someone at the nearby gas station saw them and called 911. They were arrested and treated for their delusional, drugged-out state. I was never told what happened to the guy whose eye I gouged out. Honestly, I don't want to know. I just hope I'll never have to resort to that level of violence ever again.